Tae-ho Kim could not stop his hands from shaking. He stood on the bridge of the UHSS Harmony, watching the stars through the window. This was the biggest moment of his life. Today, humans would meet the galactic sovereignty for the first time. The sovereignty ruled 43 different alien species across the galaxy. They had advanced technology that made human ships look like old toys. They had been traveling between stars for 12,000 years. Humans had only been in space for a few hundred years. Tae-ho was the ambassador. It was his job to make sure this meeting went well. One wrong word could mean war. One mistake could destroy humanity. Commander Yuna Park stood beside him. She was a military officer with 17 years of experience. She had met many isolated human colonies before, but never aliens. Her face was calm, but Tae-ho could see the worry in her eyes. Dr. Taeyang Choi was also there. He was a scientist who studied alien life. He had spent his whole career preparing for this day. He carried a tablet full of information about human culture and history. Suddenly, space itself seemed to tear open. A massive ship appeared out of nowhere. It was 3 kilometers long, covered in weapons and strange technology. The Sovereignty dreadnought made the Harmony look tiny. A message came through. The aliens wanted to board the human ship. Tae-ho took a deep breath and agreed. The delegation arrived in the main conference room. High Arbiter Velkanos led them. He was a Valthorian, tall and thin with pale skin that seemed to glow. His species lived for thousands of years and never got sick. He looked at the humans like a scientist studying insects. With him came Rishka from the Ken Collective. She was not one person but 17 bodies moving together as one mind. They surrounded the table like a living wall. Mordax was there too. He was a Kralith warrior, massive and covered in thick armor-like skin. His species had conquered 47 worlds before joining the Sovereignty. Even he seemed nervous in the conference room. The last delegate was Sylvan, a being made of living crystal. Light passed through his body in strange patterns. He communicated through sounds that needed special machines to translate. The meeting started well. Tae-ho showed images of Earth. He talked about human art and music. He explained how humans had spread to 17 star systems peacefully. He was careful not to mention weapons or military strength. The aliens listened politely. They asked questions about human technology and government. Everything was going according to plan. Then Bora ran into the room. She was a golden retriever belonging to Captain Minho Lee. Somehow she had escaped from the crew quarters. She was excited about the new visitors. Her tail wagged as she bounded across the floor, tongue hanging out, completely happy. The alien delegation reacted immediately. All 17 of Rishka's bodies scrambled backward. Mordax, the huge warrior who had fought in countless battles, actually stumbled away from the table. Even Velkanos, who had lived for 3 centuries, showed fear on his face. Bora did not understand. She thought they were scared and wanted to help. She walked up to Sylvan and sat down politely, still wagging her tail. The crystalline being flashed colors that the translator said meant extreme distress. Tae-ho was confused. Yuna looked shocked. Dr. Choi tried to figure out what was wrong. Captain Minho rushed in and grabbed Bora's collar. He apologized over and over, but the aliens kept staring at the dog with wide eyes. Finally, Velkanos spoke. His voice was shaking. He asked what that creature was. Minho looked confused. He said it was just a dog, a pet. His friend, the translator, struggled with the word pet. There was no word for it in most alien languages. Mordax pointed at Bora's teeth. He said those were the teeth of a hunter, a killer, an apex predator. Yuna tried to calm everyone down. She explained that dogs were friendly. They lived with humans. Millions of humans had dogs in their homes. They were family members. This made things worse. Rishka's 17 bodies all made sounds of panic. Velkanos stepped back further. Even through the translator, everyone could hear the fear in their voices. They asked more questions. How big can dogs get? Do they hunt? Do they kill? Are there other predators that humans keep? Dr. Choi tried to answer honestly. He explained that dogs came in many sizes. Some were tiny, but others were huge and very strong. Yes, they had hunting instincts, but they were trained and gentle. And yes, humans also kept cats, which were smaller but also predators. When he mentioned cats, Sylvan actually made a sound like breaking glass. Velkanos held up his hand. He said they needed to stop the meeting immediately. He sent an urgent message back to the Sovereignty Council. The message was marked as the highest priority. Before leaving, Velkanos turned to Daiho. He asked a simple question. How many humans keep these predators in their homes? Daiho checked his data. He said that about 67% of all human families had at least one pet. Many had more than one. The aliens left quickly. They practically ran back to their ship. The humans stood in the conference room, completely confused. Bora was very proud of herself. She thought she had made new friends. Minho petted her head and told her she was a good girl, but Yuna was worried. She had seen fear like that before, but never from warriors and diplomats. She had seen it in prey animals when predators came near. Daiho sat down heavily in his chair. First contact with aliens had lasted less than an hour. It had ended because of a dog. Dr. Choi was already working on his tablet, trying to understand what went wrong. He pulled up information about the sovereignty species. He started reading about their home worlds and evolution. Then he stopped. His face went pale. He said they had a big problem. Every single species in the galactic sovereignty had evolved from prey animals, herbivores, plant eaters, creatures that ran from predators. None of them had ever seen a species that kept predators as friends. To them, it was like humans keeping tigers and wolves in their bedrooms. It was insane, Yuna understood now. The sovereignty did not see Bora as a pet. They saw her as a monster that humans somehow controlled. And if humans could control predators, what did that make humans? Daiho received a message. The sovereignty wanted to meet again in 3 days. But this time, they wanted to come to Earth. They wanted to see human society for themselves. They wanted to understand what kind of species kept apex predators in their homes and called them family. Bora lay down at Minho's feet, tired from all the excitement. She closed her eyes and went to sleep. She had no idea that she had just changed the course of human history. The humans looked at each other. They had so many questions. Would the sovereignty accept them? Would they be afraid of all humans now? What would happen when the aliens learned more about Earth? Daiho made a decision. He would invite the aliens to his own home in Seoul. They would meet his family. They would see normal humans living normal lives with their pets. Maybe then the sovereignty would understand, or maybe it would make everything worse. But they had to try. The future of humanity depended on it. 12 hours had passed since the Vorath gave their warning. War Master Throne sat in his command chair waiting for the humans to surrender. Instead, his communication officer received a strange message from the station. It was short and simple. All non-military personnel must leave the station within 6 hours. The message included coordinates for safe zones away from the fighting. Thrawn laughed when he heard this. The humans thought they could fight. They were warning the Vorath to move their people to safety. It was backwards and foolish. His empire had 300 warships around the station. The humans had maybe a few defense platforms and some old weapons. This would be over quickly. On the station, Hayuk helped his wife and daughter pack their things. Mira moved quickly and quietly. She had done this before many years ago. She knew what to bring and what to leave behind. Nari was scared but trying not to show it. She hugged her father tightly at the docking bay. He kissed her forehead and promised to come back. Mira looked into his eyes and nodded. She understood what was happening. Then they boarded the transport ship with thousands of other civilians. Hyuk watched the transport leave. Around him, the station was changing. The restaurants and shops were closing. People were removing their work clothes and putting on different outfits. Some wore old uniforms that still fit. Others wore simple combat gear that had been stored away. Everyone moved with purpose but without panic. Day locked his jewelry shop and walked to the docking bay area. Under the floor of his shop, he had kept equipment wrapped in protective cloth. Now he carried it in a bag over his shoulder. His hands that made delicate gold chains now checked weapons with the same careful attention. Everything worked perfectly. He had maintained them even though he hoped never to use them again. Soon left her greenhouse after saying goodbye to her plants. She moved faster than any old woman should be able to move. Her back was straight and her eyes were sharp. She went to a storage locker and opened it with a code she had not used in 30 years. Inside was gear that fit her perfectly. She put it on piece by piece, and with each piece she became less like a gardener and more like something else. Jin put away his painting supplies and picked up electronic equipment. He had been an artist for decades, but before that, he had been something different. His fingers that mixed colors now programmed systems and set up networks. The station's corridors became filled with sensors and communication relays. Everything connected and worked together. Tay sat in what used to be his office. Now it was a command center with screens showing every part of the station. He had been a businessman, organizing trade routes and supplies. Those same skills now organized weapons, ammunition, and power distribution. He knew exactly what was needed, where and when. Nothing was wasted. On the Vorath flagship, the intelligence officer Krex brought new information to Throne. They had been studying Earth's history. What they found was disturbing. 50 years ago, humans had fought a war, not against aliens, but against each other. The war lasted 40 years and killed 3 billion people. That was almost half of all humans alive at that time. Krex showed Throne the records, weapons that could crack planets, diseases made in laboratories that killed billions, machines that hunted and killed for years without stopping, entire worlds burned, cities destroyed so completely that nothing remained, and the humans fought this war against themselves. Brother against brother, city against city, continent against continent. Throne read the reports and tried to understand. After the war ended, the surviving humans did something strange. They stopped fighting. They destroyed most of their weapons. They disbanded their armies. Every soldier went home and became a normal citizen. They chose peace not because they lost, but because they were tired of winning. The War Master did not believe humans who gave up fighting could be dangerous now. Warriors who stopped being warriors were just civilians, soft and weak. He ordered his ships to attack the station's defenses. It was meant to be a small attack, just to scare the humans. 6 Vorath ships moved forward and fired on the station's weapon platforms. What happened next shocked everyone on the Vorath flagship. The weapons platforms the ships were shooting at were fake. Empty boxes made to look like defenses. The real weapons came from places that looked like normal buildings. A residential section opened up and missiles flew out. A greenhouse roof slid back and guns started firing. A docking arm that looked broken suddenly moved and shot metal projectiles faster than bullets. Soon sat at the controls of the greenhouse weapons. Her fingers moved across the screens with perfect accuracy. She had spent 30 years growing plants, but before that she had spent 12 years shooting down ships. Her hands remembered. The targeting system showed 6 Vorath vessels. She fired. 3 of them exploded. The other 3 retreated with heavy damage. In the command center, Hyuk watched the displays showing every part of the battle. Around him worked dozens of people who used to be shop owners, artists, teachers, and parents. Now they coordinated defenses like they had done it yesterday instead of 30 years ago. Every order was calm and clear. Every response was fast and exact. Day managed the ammunition supplies. He knew exactly how many shots each weapon had. He knew exactly how long each power cell would last. He redirected resources before anyone even asked. Tay watched the Vorath ship movements and predicted where they would go next. Jin made the Vorath sensors give wrong information so their ships shot at empty space. Thrawn stared at his casualty reports. 6 ships, just like that. His best crews trained for years, destroyed in seconds by weapons that appeared from nowhere. The humans had hidden their true defenses perfectly. The Vorath had attacked what they thought was a weak target. Instead, they attacked a trap. Krex brought more information. The humans defending the station were all civilians. Every one of them had fought in the last war. The restaurant owner was a former commander who had defended a city for 8 months against impossible odds. The old woman in the greenhouse had been a weapons officer who never missed. The young artist was an electronic warfare specialist who had disabled entire fleets. The businessman was a logistics expert who had kept armies supplied across multiple worlds. The jewelry maker had been a demolitions expert. Every civilian on the station had a history. Every one of them had been a soldier. And every one of them remembered exactly how to fight even after decades of peace. The 6-hour deadline came. All the human civilians had left the station. Only the defenders remained. Thrawn looked at the station on his screens. It looked damaged but not defeated. His ships had superior numbers. His weapons were powerful. But for the first time in his career he felt uncertain. Hyuk opened a communication channel to the Vorath flagship. His voice was calm but different from before. When he ran the restaurant, he sounded friendly and welcoming. Now he sounded like what he really was. A soldier who had fought in the worst war humanity ever knew. A man who had seen things the Vorath could not imagine. A veteran who had put away his weapons by choice, not because he had lost. He spoke directly to Throne. The words were simple. Leave now. Go back to your empire. Tell them Earth wants peace. But if you stay, if you attack, You will learn what humans are really capable of. This is your last chance to walk away. After this, there will be no more warnings." Thrawn heard the message and had to choose. His pride told him to attack. His training told him to crush any resistance. But something else, some instinct earned from years of combat, told him this was different. These were not scared primitives. These were not weak civilians. These were warriors who had been pretending to be normal people. And now they had stopped pretending. On the station, Soon checked her weapons and waited. Dee made sure every defensive position had what it needed. Jin watched the Vorath fleet through electronic eyes and calculated their next moves. Tay organized supply lines for a battle that might last days or weeks. Hyuk stood in the command center and hoped the Vorath would be smart enough to leave. But he prepared for them to be foolish enough to stay. The Vorath fleet held its position, 300 ships against one station. The odds seemed clear. But odds did not tell the whole story. The humans on that station had learned to fight in the hardest way possible. They had fought themselves. They had fought people who thought like they did, who used the same tactics, who were just as smart and just as desperate, and they had survived. Whatever the Vorath did next, the galaxy would learn something that the humans had tried to hide. Earth's most dangerous weapons were not bombs or ships or guns. They were the ordinary people who chose peace after mastering war. And when those people picked up their weapons again, they remembered everything. War Master Throne made his decision. The Vorath Empire did not retreat. They did not negotiate with those who refused to surrender. He ordered the full attack. 300 warships moved into formation around Station Kepler. Weapons charged. Crews prepared for battle. This was the formation that had conquered 100 worlds. It would work again. On Earth below, billions of people watched the displays. Many of them were old soldiers like those on the station. They had children and grandchildren now. They had jobs and homes and peaceful lives. But they remembered the last war. They remembered what it meant to fight. And they were ready to do it again if they had to. The Vorath attacked with overwhelming power. Missiles flew through space by the thousands. Energy weapons lit up the darkness. The station's shields flared bright as they absorbed the impacts. Explosions bloomed across its surface. Sections lost power. Hull plates melted. The Vorath expected the defenses to break quickly. Instead, the humans adapted. Soon watched her screens as Vorath missiles approached. She fired counter missiles that intercepted them before impact. When one defensive position was destroyed, she switched to backup systems instantly. There was no panic, no hesitation, just smooth transitions from one weapon to another like a musician changing instruments. Day managed the ammunition flow. Weapons that ran out of shots were restocked within seconds. Power cells that depleted were replaced immediately. He had supply routes planned 3 moves ahead. When a storage area was hit, he had already rerouted everything to a different location. Nothing stopped moving. Nothing ran dry. Jin worked his electronic warfare magic. He made the Vorath sensors see things that were not there. He made their targeting computers aim at empty space. When they adjusted, he adjusted faster. He had learned these skills fighting humans, who were better at electronic warfare than any species in the galaxy. The Vorath were good, but they were not that good. Tay coordinated everything from the command center. He saw the whole battle like a giant puzzle. Every piece had to fit. Every resource had to go where it was needed most. He made decisions faster than computers, not because he was smarter, but because he had done this for years during the last war. His experience was worth more than any machine. Yuk stood at the tactical display and gave orders in a calm voice. Move defensive fire to Sector 7. Redirect power to the eastern shields. Launch counterattack from Platform 12. Each order was short and clear. Nobody questioned them. Nobody needed explanations. They all understood what needed to be done. The battle was not easy. The Vorath were experienced warriors. They had conquered many worlds and knew how to fight. They adapted their tactics. They concentrated fire on weak points. They sent boarding parties to attack from inside. Every move was professional and well-planned. The station took heavy damage. A residential section lost pressure and vented atmosphere. A power generator exploded and took out nearby systems. Fires started in 3 different areas. The Vorath were winning through sheer numbers. But the humans did not break. They did not panic. They just kept fighting. Soon's position was hit by a direct missile strike. The greenhouse where she had spent 30 years growing plants was destroyed in seconds. She evacuated with her team to a backup location 2 corridors away. It took 40 seconds. She was firing again in 45. The Vorath never got a break in her defensive coverage. Day was injured when debris from an explosion hit his shoulder. Maddox wrapped it quickly while he kept working. He talked a younger defender through taking over one of his supply routes. His voice stayed calm even though blood was soaking through the bandage. Pain was temporary. The mission mattered more. On the Vorath flagship, Krek studied the battle data with growing concern. The humans were not fighting like defenders trying to survive. They were fighting like veterans who knew exactly what they were doing. Every tactical decision was optimal. Every counterattack exploited weaknesses perfectly. This was not luck. This was skill earned through experience. He listened to the human communications that his team intercepted. What he heard was disturbing. The humans talked about this battle like it was routine. Hyuk mentioned a siege he survived that lasted 8 months. Soon joked that this was easier than a battle she fought on a place called Midway. They were comparing the Vorath attack to their own wars. Wars where both sides were equally matched and equally determined. Thrawn committed his elite boarding troops. These were his best soldiers, trained for years in close combat. They breached the station in 4 locations and entered the corridors. What they found was hell. The humans had turned every passage into a trap. Every corner hid a weapon. Every room was a potential ambush. The Vorath troops were brave and skilled, but they were fighting in an environment designed by humans to kill other humans. The corridors were narrow. The lighting was controlled by the defenders. The walls had hidden panels that opened to reveal weapons. The Vorath advanced and died. They retreated and died. They held position and died. The defenders did not fight with honor or glory. They fought to win. They used every advantage. They showed no mercy because mercy got you killed. These were lessons learned in the last war. Lessons written in the blood of billions. Lessons that humans taught each other and never forgot. As the battle continued, new contacts appeared on the Vorath scanners. Ships coming from Earth orbit, not civilian vessels this time. These were warships. They moved in perfect formation with practiced precision. Each ship had a name: Incheon, Thermopylae, Hastings, Gettysburg. Names that meant nothing to the Vorath but everything to humans. The fleet was commanded by Admiral Sung. She had been a school teacher for 40 years. Before that, she had commanded the combined fleet during the last war. She had fought in battles that made the current fight look small. She had made decisions that killed millions but saved billions. She had retired when the war ended and tried to forget. Now she remembered everything. Her first transmission was simple: Earth Defense Force to all vessels. Hold formation. Weapons free on my command. There was no anger in her voice. No hatred, just professional calm. The tone of someone who had done this many times before and would do it right. Thrawn watched the Earth fleet approach and finally understood. These humans had not lost their warrior heritage. They had locked it away because it was too dangerous. They had chosen peace not from weakness, but from knowing exactly what they were capable of. They had fought each other with weapons and tactics designed to kill beings just as smart and adaptable as themselves. The Vorath had conquered many species. Some fought back. Some surrendered. But none of them had been like this. None of them had spent decades perfecting the art of war against opponents who thought like they did. The Vorath were good at conquest. Humans were good at survival. And there was a difference. Krek showed Throne the casualty reports. The Vorath had lost 40 ships. The station was damaged but still fighting. The boarding troops were trapped and dying. And now Earth's fleet had arrived. 300 Vorath ships against 200 human vessels. The numbers seemed close, but numbers did not tell the whole story. On the station, Hyuk watched the Earth fleet arrive on his displays. He did not feel triumph. He felt sadness. They had tried so hard to be different. They had spent 50 years building a peaceful civilization. They had raised children who never knew war. And now all that work was endangered because the Vorath could not understand what humans had chosen to be. Soon finished reloading her weapons and waited for orders. Day organized supply chains to support both the station and the fleet. Jin prepared to coordinate electronic warfare across hundreds of ships. Tay updated his plans to include fleet logistics. They all knew what came next. They all wished it did not have to happen. Admiral Sung opened a channel to the Vorath flagship. She offered a ceasefire. She gave Throne one more chance to withdraw. Her voice was not threatening. It was almost pleading. "Please," she said, "please do not make us do this. We know what we are capable of. We spent 50 years trying to forget. Please do not force us to remember." Throne looked at his officers. He looked at the tactical displays. He looked at the human fleet waiting patiently for his response. And for the first time in his long military career, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. These were not primitives to be conquered. These were veterans who had put away their weapons by choice, and they were offering him a way out. The question was whether he was smart enough to take it. Throne accepted the ceasefire. The Vorath fleet stopped firing. The human fleet held position but did not attack. The battle ended not with victory but with silence. Both sides pulled back their forces. The wounded were treated, the dead were counted, and then came the time to talk. The meeting happened on a neutral station run by an alien species that traded with both humans and Vorath. Throne arrived expecting to surrender or negotiate a retreat. Instead, he found Hyuk Soon and Admiral Sung waiting for him. There were no guards, no weapons visible. Just 3 tired humans sitting at a table. Throne had a bandage on his head from when his flagship was hit. Hyuk's hands shook slightly as he poured water for everyone. Soon stared at nothing, her eyes seeing things that were not in the room. Admiral Sung looked older than she had in the battle recordings. She spoke first. She told the story of the last war. It started small, she said. Disagreements over resources. Different ideas about how to live. Old grudges between groups. Normal things that usually get solved with talking. But this time talking failed. Fighting started. And once it started, it could not stop. The weapons got worse each year. First it was normal bombs and bullets. Then it was weapons that could destroy whole cities. Then weapons that could crack planets. Diseases made in laboratories that killed anyone they touched. Machines that hunted people for years without stopping. Both sides kept making worse and worse things to win, but nobody won. The war just kept going. Children were born in underground bunkers and never saw the sun. Cities burned for so long that people forgot what they looked like before. Entire planets became tombs where nothing lived anymore. 3 billion humans died. That was almost half of everyone. Hyuk talked about his experience. He fought for 12 years, he said. His voice was quiet and sad. He saw his home planet destroyed. He gave orders that killed millions of people. When the peace finally came, he was 28 years old but felt like an old man. He had nightmares every night. He could not stop thinking about the things he did, so he made a choice. He put everything away. The uniform, the weapons, the skills, the mindset. He became a cook. He opened a restaurant. He married Mira and they had Nari. He spent 30 years cooking food and serving customers. Every day he chose to be something other than a soldier. Not because he was weak, but because he knew what being a soldier cost. Soon spoke last. Her voice was even quieter than Hyuk's. She told Throne about her greenhouse. Every plant in it represented someone she killed during the war. Thousands of plants, thousands of lives. She remembered all their names. She remembered all their faces. The greenhouse was not a hobby. It was her way of remembering what she did. She said she never wanted to forget. Forgetting would make it easier to do again. So every day she tended her plants. Every day she thought about the people who died. Every day she chose to grow things instead of destroy them. That was her punishment and her penance. Thrawn listened and started to understand. These humans were not bragging. They were confessing. Every word carried guilt. They were not proud of what they could do. They were ashamed. But they had been forced to do it anyway because the Vorath would not listen. Admiral Sung explained the terms. The Vorath fleet would leave. They would go back to their empire. They would tell everyone that humans want peace but will fight if they have to. No payment. No prisoners. No occupation. The humans just wanted to go back to the lives they built. Thrawn asked why. Why not destroy the Vorath fleet and end the threat forever? Why not conquer the Vorath Empire and make sure they never attacked again? Admiral Sung's answer was simple. Because we remember what it costs. Because we know what happens after the fighting stops. She described the years after the last war. The celebrations felt empty. Veterans could not fit back into normal life. Children were afraid of their parents. The suicide rate was terrible. People used drugs and alcohol to forget. Some people just gave up and stopped trying. An entire generation was broken. Humans won the war against themselves. The prize was guilt and pain that lasted for decades. Building a peaceful civilization was harder than fighting. It took 50 years of constant effort. Every day, people like Hyuk woke up and chose not to be soldiers. Every day they worked to forget the skills that came so naturally. And now they had been forced to remember. Destroying the Vorath fleet would be easy. Living with it afterwards would be hard. More nightmares, more guilt, more broken people. The humans did not want that. They wanted to go home. They wanted their peaceful lives back, even if those lives were now tainted by the memory of what they did to defend them. Thrawn went back to his fleet. His officers wanted to keep fighting. They said retreating was shameful. He showed them a recording from the battle. He made them watch how the humans fought. No honor, no glory, just cold efficiency. The humans did not win through courage. They won through experience bought with the blood of billions of their own people. The Vorath prided themselves on being warriors. But watching that recording, they realized they had never really fought a war. They had conquered weaker species. They had won battles against opponents who could not match them. The humans had fought themselves. Beings just as smart, just as adaptable, just as determined. And that made all the difference. The Vorath fleet left. They did not chase or attack. They just held position as the alien ships departed. And on Station Kepler, the veterans began trying to forget again. But it was harder this time. The memories were fresh. The skills were sharp. The part of them that was a soldier had woken up, and it did not want to sleep again. Hyuk stood in his destroyed restaurant. The walls were blackened. The tables were gone. The kitchen was ruined. He could rebuild it. But would it ever feel the same? His daughter Nari sent him a message. She said she watched the battle footage. She said she did not recognize the man in the recordings. The father she knew was gentle and kind. That other person scared her, soon returned to her greenhouse. Most of the plants were dead, destroyed in the fighting. She began replanting. But this time she added new specimens. One for each Vorath soldier who died. She knew their names. She pulled them from the casualty reports. More lives to remember. More guilt to carry. Day tried to reopen his jewelry shop. But his hands shook too much now. The trauma he thought he had dealt with came back worse than before. He could hold a weapon steady, but he could not work the delicate tools of his trade. The soldier part of him was too strong. The artist part was broken. Tay sat alone in his office and cried. He had not cried in 30 years. During the last war, he learned to turn off his emotions. He had to, or he could not do his job. Now those emotions came flooding back, all the pain he had been holding inside, all the guilt, all the loss. It overwhelmed him. Jin kept painting, but his art changed. He used to paint happy things, beautiful landscapes, joyful scenes. Now his paintings were dark. They showed the duality of human nature, the capacity for both creation and destruction, the ability to be gentle and violent. His art gained recognition across the galaxy, but it lost its innocence. Admiral Sung went back to Earth and retired again. She returned to teaching, but her students were different now. They knew what she was. They knew what she had done. Some admired her. Some feared her. None of them saw her as just a teacher anymore. That simple identity was gone forever. Across the station and on Earth below, millions of veterans struggled with the same realization. They could never truly forget. The peace they built was fragile. The civilian lives they made were thin masks over what they really were. One threat was all it took to strip away 30 years of careful construction. They had proven they could fight. They had defended their homes. They had won. But the cost was not measured in ships or casualties. The cost was measured in lost innocence, in broken relationships, in the knowledge that they could become killers again so easily. That was the price of memory. That was what it cost to be Earth's most dangerous soldiers hiding in plain sight as civilians. 6 months passed after the Vorath left. The galaxy now knew the truth about humanity. The peaceful species that welcomed traders and artists was actually a civilization of warriors. Some alien species withdrew their diplomats and stopped trading. Others sent messages asking for military alliances. The Vorath Empire even sent representatives asking to hire human military advisors. Humanity had to decide what it wanted to be. Hyuk rebuilt his restaurant. The physical repairs were finished quickly. Fixing the emotional damage took longer. Customers came back slowly. Some treated him like a hero. They wanted to shake his hand and hear stories. Others avoided eye contact and ate quietly. They saw him as a killer who had been hiding among them. Both reactions hurt. His relationship with Nari remained difficult. She loved her father. She knew that. But she had watched footage of the battle. She saw him calmly giving orders that killed thousands of Vorath. The disconnect between the gentle man who taught her to cook and the efficient commander in the recordings confused her. How could he be both? They had dinner together once a week. The conversations were awkward. Nari wanted to ask questions but did not know how. Yuk wanted to explain but did not have the words. They ate in silence mostly. The easy relationship they once had was gone. Maybe it would come back. Maybe it would not. Soon faced similar problems. Her greenhouse was replanted and growing again. But the joy she once found in nurturing life was different now. She knew she could kill with the same hands that grew flowers. The younger generation on the station treated her with nervous respect. They asked for stories about the old days. She always refused. The memories were not adventures to celebrate. They were wounds that hurt. She did not want young people to think war was glorious. She did not want them to see her as a hero. She just wanted to tend her plants and remember the people who died. That was enough burden to carry. Day closed his jewelry shop permanently. His hands shook too badly to work anymore. The trauma he thought he had processed returned with interest. He spent his days in therapy sessions. The therapist tried to help him reconcile the artist and the soldier. It was slow progress. Some days he made breakthroughs. Other days he felt like he was back at the beginning. Jin continued painting murals around the station. But the themes changed. Where he once painted celebrations of peace, he now depicted the duality of human nature. His art showed people being both gentle and violent, kind and dangerous. His work gained recognition across the galaxy. Critics called it profound. But Jin missed painting simple, happy things. The galactic response to humanity was complicated. The Vorath Empire started changing. Thrawn's report about the battle split their military leaders. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted to understand why humans chose peace after mastering war. The debate led to reforms. Not everyone agreed, but enough did to start change. Other alien species reacted in unexpected ways. A delegation from the Chiron Collective visited Earth. They explained that they had also fought a terrible civil war centuries ago. They chose a different path. They modified their own biology to make them less aggressive. They offered to share the technology with humans. The offer caused huge debates. Some humans wanted it. They said removing the capacity for violence would prevent future wars. Others rejected it completely. They said violence was part of being human, good and bad. Removing it would change what humans were. The choice to be peaceful was meaningful only if violence was still possible. Admiral Sung spoke to the United Earth Assembly. The chamber was full of former soldiers who were now politicians, teachers, merchants, and artists. She spoke plainly without fancy words. The galaxy knows what we can do, she said. We cannot change that. The question is not whether to return to peace. The question is how to keep it while knowing what we are capable of. The debates lasted for months. Every option was discussed. Some wanted to rebuild the military to full strength. Others wanted to disarm completely. Some wanted to become mercenaries and sell their skills. Others wanted to modify themselves to be less dangerous. The arguments were passionate and sometimes angry. Finally, humanity made a decision. They would not change their nature. They would not become weapons for hire. They would not rebuild their military to the size it was during the last war. Instead, they would do what they always tried to do. Be better than their worst impulses while acknowledging those impulses existed. The Earth Defense Force would stay active but remain small. Veterans like Hayuk and Soon would return to civilian life. But they would keep their skills sharp. Regular training. Updated equipment. Ready to fight if needed, but hoping they never would be. The weapons would not be destroyed, but they would not be displayed either. Hidden, but maintained. The message to the galaxy was clear and simple. Humans choose peace. but they will defend themselves if forced. They are not ashamed of what they can do, but they are not defined by it either. The capacity for violence exists. The choice to restrain it is what matters. Nari finally visited her father's restaurant after months of awkwardness. She sat across from him and asked the question that had been bothering her. How can you be both? How can you be the gentle father who taught me to cook and the soldier who killed thousands? The question was honest and painful. Yuck thought for a long time before answering. He said he did not know. He lived with the contradiction every day. Both things were true. Both things were him. But every morning, he chose to be the father. He chose to cook food instead of fight. That choice was what defined him. Not what he could do, but what he chose to do. Nari listened and started to understand. Her father was not two different people. He was one person with two sides. The capacity for gentleness and violence existed together. What mattered was which side he chose to show. She reached across the table and held his hand. It would take time, but maybe they could rebuild what was lost. 10 years later, Station Kepler was thriving again. Hayuk's restaurant was always busy. Nari worked there with him now. She learned all his recipes and added some of her own. They talked easily again. The awkwardness had faded. She understood her father better. He was still her dad, just more complicated than she thought. Soon's greenhouse was larger than ever. It had become a memorial visited by people from across the galaxy. Each plant represented a life lost. Not just human lives, but Vorath too. Soon tended them all with equal care. Visitors came to reflect and remember, to think about the cost of war and the value of peace. Day's hands eventually steadied enough to work again. He made jewelry that incorporated symbols from dozens of alien cultures. His designs were popular. People said his work had depth and meaning. He knew it came from his experiences. The pain shaped him. He would never be who he was before, but he found a new version of himself. Jin completed his largest mural on the station's main concourse. It showed humans in both roles, warriors and civilians, artists and soldiers. At the center was a simple image, a sword being transformed into a farming tool, but the design showed it could be changed back if needed. Not a celebration of war or peace. A reminder of choice. The galaxy had accepted humanity's nature. Some species still feared them. Others respected them. A few, inspired by the human example, began their own processes of change. Species that had been conquered started questioning their oppressors. If humans could choose peace after mastering war, what did that say about empires built on violence? Admiral Sung retired again and went back to teaching. But now her lessons included discussions about choice and responsibility. Her grandchildren visited sometimes. They asked about the war. She told them the truth. Humanity won by becoming what they hated. Then they won again by choosing to put it away. That second victory was harder and more important. Hugh stood in his restaurant one evening, watching the stars through the viewport. Somewhere in storage, his uniform still hung ready. He hoped he would never wear it again, but he knew if he had to, he would. Not because he wanted to fight, but because some things were worth defending. The trick was knowing when fighting was necessary, and when it was just easier than the hard work of peace. The story of humanity spread across the galaxy. It became a lesson other species studied, not about how to fight, but about how to choose. The most dangerous soldiers were those who knew exactly what they were capable of and chose restraint. The truest strength was not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to create instead. Earth's veterans continued living their dual lives. Shop owners and soldiers, artists and warriors, parents and fighters. The contradiction never fully resolved. But they learned to live with it. Every day was a choice. Every morning they decided who to be. And most days, they chose peace. That was humanity's real power, not the weapons they built or the skills they possessed, but the daily choice to be better than they could be. to choose gentleness over violence, to choose growth over destruction, to remember what they were capable of and choose to be something else instead. That was what made them dangerous. That was what made them human.